Today, we're back working on those big block Ford heads, so let's get started. So in the first video that I did about the big block Ford heads, I was going to tell you and show you how to do a budget port job in which you don't need to have a flow bench. It's just about utilizing David Vizard's 5 golden rules of head porting. When you do this in this basic format, you really don't have to worry about, am I going to screw the port up? Because what we're going to do is look at the minor restrictions that are pretty obvious, and we're going to eliminate those. And what that's going to do is deliver a cylinder head that's going to flow more and give you exactly what you want, which is more power and torque. Before we get started, I mentioned David's 5 golden rules of head porting in the first video. If you want to learn about that, you need to really check this book out. You can get it off of Amazon or anywhere else, but I highly suggest it. And it's a great book on porting, and you might even see some 4.6 stuff that David and I did when I first met him. And yeah, there's my name right there. So anyways, getting back on topic, we're going to talk about the 5 golden rules. Rule number 1 is locate the point of greatest restriction and work on that first. This here will get you the best bang for the buck as far as amount of time, because that's what we're looking to do with these cylinder heads here, is not have a ton of time invested in it and trying to redevelop the port. We're just trying to locate the restriction, remove it, and make it as best it can. Rule number 2, let the air move the way it wants to, not the way you think it should. This is where a lot of people go wrong, including myself. I've been down this road. You have to understand that air is very lazy, and it's wanting to go to the path of least resistance, and the way it moves is not always the way we think it does. Okay? Rule number 3, air is heavier than you think. Keep up port velocities and avoid redundant cross-sectional areas. This rule is pretty much not going to really apply to what we're doing, because we're not going to dive into the port as much with this video series. But this is something that you need to be aware of if you're trying to port a set of cylinder heads to get the maximum result. Mixture motion is important. Do not ignore the need for it. Especially in low RPM situations, having good swirl is paramount to getting good torque delivery. So don't ignore it by any stretch of the imagination. And then last but not least, rule number 5, shape is all important. A shiny finish is not. You can have a shiny finish on a turd, and guess what? It's still a turd. So don't have a shiny turd with your engine. Make sure that it's shaped the way it's supposed to be. Flow capability cannot be judged by its reflectivity. A lot of people see a set of cylinder heads, and because someone's done a really good job with a sandpaper roll, they think that that's a great porting job. The shape of the port is very, very, very important. One thing that most people get wrong is everybody always refers to port and polish. Nope, that is so wrong. It should be port and shape, not polish. That is something that has been used incorrectly for nearly 70 years. All right, so now we're getting to the business end of the deal. This is a little showcase of the things that you're going to need to do this job properly. Okay, starting out with the Dicom layout fluid. I think you can pick this up at any Fastenal store. Since I don't have any big block Ford dowels, what you can do is find a socket that fits the dowel holes properly. In this case, it's a 1/2 inch 3/8 drive socket. And what that will do is locate the gasket properly where it's going to be on the engine itself. Important note, if DV and I were doing this, what we typically do is mount the cylinder head to the bare block, and then from the bottom side we will use the cylinder itself instead of the head gasket. But since I do not have a big block Ford block here, I'm kind of cheating and using the gasket. The one important note when you're laying this out and you're scribing is the angle in which you're holding the scribe. If you hold it almost perpendicular to the deck surface, that is not going to be correct. If you come over here and you scribe at this kind of angle going around, it will be more representative of the actual bore size. And this, I did these two here as an example for you. Notice the gap right there, and then you come over here and how it's much narrower. What that does, that is not actually where the cylinder wall will be. When doing this with a head gasket like this, it's important to use a head gasket with the proper bore size. Most head gaskets that you purchase have a larger bore than the cylinder that you're putting it on. That's bad for multiple reasons. One, it gets into crevice volume. Crevice volume is not a good thing. I'm not going to get into that in this video, but if you're not careful and you take it out to this dimension and that is larger than your cylinder, that means that the chamber is going to overhang the cylinder wall, which can cause issues. We do not want that. We want to take this wall right out to the edge of where the cylinder wall will be a perfect match. Now you might be asking yourself, why does Andy have a set of valves right here? Well, these are not valves that's going to be used. These are valves that we have modified, ground the margin off of the edge of the valve to actually make a seat protector. So when we put this in here, we can actually get as far down as we can to the top of the chamber without fear of damaging the valve seat. So we do that with the intake and the exhaust. And basically what you would do is find two old valves, go to your bench grinder, and just grind down the edges until that is kind of a sharp edge right there. Most cylinder heads will have this ridge right here from where they press in the valve seats, and that's bad for flow. So we need to get down there so that we can smooth all of that out without fear of damaging anything. So you may be asking yourself, how do David and myself know that these chambers are shrouded the way that they are? I'm getting ready to show you the method that we use. We use these things called flow balls. Now they're pretty expensive, but you can get around that with some other techniques. Let's take a look. So this is how we determine if the valve is actually shrouded. This is called a flow ball. We use this when we're doing Flowbench work to determine areas that are active or maybe inactive in a port, but we also use it for shrouding purposes to find out where a valve is shrouded. And basically it's a simple process such as this right here, seeing where the ball will pass through, and normally start out around 3/16 of an inch and work our way up. You see the ball passes through, and then when it gets right here, it is shrouded. So basically to right there, that wall right there is shrouding it. And then you go up here and you see it comes out right there. So I know there will be people who comment and say, Andy, you're killing the compression of this engine by doing this. Well, let me tell you, Yes, we may open the chamber up a few cc's, but the gains that we get from increased flow will completely annihilate that slight decrease in compression. Keep that in mind. Okay, so what I do is once I've established where the ball will pass through and not, I will take a Sharpie, mark it, and as you can see here, a quarter, almost an entire quarter of this valve is being shrouded by this area right here on the intake valve. I'm getting ready to open this up. I'm going to take out the real valve and put in the protector, and then we will do the same thing on the exhaust. One thing that you have to keep in mind is as the piston is coming up to the top of the deck here, where does the exhaust want to flow? Okay, as the valve is opening, this here should be the first point in which an exhaust gases starts to pass through, because otherwise it has to go up around to the top of the chamber in order to get out. So we need to be looking at what David calls an scavenge plateau right here, so that we can get that exhaust charge moving faster in the process. Alright, before we talk about making first cut, you know, definitely you're going to need some carbide cutters. And DV has a really good video on his channel talking about the tools that we use. And we get most of our porting supplies from Goodson, but go check out that video. That way you can see exactly what you will need to do this type of work. Alright, so I've spent maybe 20 minutes on this chamber right here. So the question is, did we make any progress? Comparing it to this one here, you can see that I laid this wall back as far as I could. You may see that I slightly went over. That is because I scribed this one to the small side, if you remember what I was talking about. So that being slightly over is actually dead on. But I've pretty much all but removed the ridge down here. And now we're going to see where the flow ball comes out at. Using our flow ball, go up from this side here. You see that it still will not come out where I originally put the mark, even though I took it out to the line. That means I need to straighten this wall up as it has an angle in. Coming to the top, you see it passes through, and stops right about there. Now this area here will be really difficult to get it to pass through because it's the closest to the cylinder wall. But what I would do is take my marker and put a mark here and keep that mark there and work just there. I do not need to touch this anymore because that is perfect. Another trick I'll sometimes use is use the Dicom here and use the flow ball, to actually scribe the mark onto the Dicom of where it's actually touching. And you'll be able to see a faint line of where the ball is actually touching right there, and we want to remove that. We don't want to go down in there and dig that out, but what we want to do is from that point forward. So this is pretty much roughed in right here. I was talking to David, we're going to do some more work down here for the bigger flow ball, but as you can see that this thing will pass through all but right there, right against the wall. And you have to remember that big blocks are severely undervalved in most cases. Even with a 2 1/4 inch valve, for the given displacement, that's not enough valve to feed the cylinder. So having a big valve and having it shrouded, it just complicates the matters even worse. So it's all about using what you have to the maximum effect. So that pretty much wraps up this video. I hope you've gotten something from it. We have a long ways to go on these big block Ford heads. And using this ball method is something that's unique to David Vizard. In fact, I don't think anyone else out there uses that method to deshroud chambers. And let me tell you, it pays huge dividends. So I know Jason is going to want these cylinder heads on an engine so that he can outrun mixed up boss, but man, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. We've got a race between Jason and I to see who gets into the 5s first in the 8th mile. But I hope you come back to part 2 or part 3, whatever part it is that I'm on, of getting these cylinder heads. We'll dive more into the exhaust side, and then we'll start talking about port bias and doing a little bit of bowl work. And then we'll see what we end up with, because I guarantee you it will be good. So until next time, this is Andy from Unity Motorsports Garage. I will catch you later. Have a shiny finish on a turd, and guess what? It's still a turd. So this here, David thought that was funny. It's better to have the shape. We'll put that in the blooper reel. So don't have a shiny turd with your engine. Make sure that it's shaped the way it's supposed to be.